It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, it's the Real Estate Breakfast on another Monday, which is dropped, and D-Day for a lot of people back to work for the first time this year. That might be you, so good luck to grinding it out today. It is a Monday, January the 19th. Hope the weekend was a good one. Watched the new Rip movie last night with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Some very twisty turns that keeps this film moving along, and how things have changed. A year ago, neither of these actors would have probably appeared on the Joe Rogan show, but there they were on Saturday talking all about their new movie. Probably in part because Joe Rogan has changed his leanings towards Trump, so much so that he is now criticising Trump over his actions of ICE, especially the woman that was shot at point-blank range in the face and killed. You know, America has elements to it at the moment that looks more like Russia, with people being dragged off the street. And Trump continues to want Greenland, now tariffing different European countries. Yes, when he wants something, he goes after it pretty hard. Nobody can deny him that. Now, Australia's rental market is finally hitting a bit of a speed limit. After years of sharp rises, rents are starting to flatten in parts of the country as tenants simply run out of room to pay more. And according to Domain, some capitals like Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth have seen rents stall, even though cities like Brisbane and Hobart are still edging higher. They say the market hasn't softened, it's just become far more fragmented, slower and driven by affordability ceilings rather than demand alone. Well, we are back into the summer series. Coming next, into the time tunnel we go.
You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
Isn't it nice to be talking about borrowing capacity at the other end of the spectrum? You know, for such a long period of time over the last few years, we've been sort of going backwards with how much people can borrow, and it should be even more good news. Well, it's good news now, obviously, because they're talking to their mortgage brokers, very happy that they can borrow more. But come November, what a nice little springboard that is into Christmas, with people getting busy to buy properties.
I was going to say early Christmas present, isn't it? Whether you're in the market to buy something or a bit more rate relief coming from the RBA. It's interesting, though, we've still seen households hold up extremely well through interest rate rises from 2022 to peaking in November 2023. Things like reducing savings and putting more money towards mortgage payments, putting a little bit less into offset and redraw and putting more into principal and interest payments, and also the savings buffers that were built up through COVID really saw a lot of financial stability during interest rate rises. Mortgage arrears have remained quite low, and now we're starting to see a bit of an improvement in household conditions as well. That savings rate is moving back up. More money is going into savings buffers now. So I think we've gotten out the other side of rapid rate increases fairly well, which tends to come back to the pretty strong lending standards that we have in Australia, and that's supported stability in the housing market as well.
Let's dive into the home value update for July, because you've got some details here for us this morning, Eliza.
Yeah, so in July, we got our end of month data showing another increase in national home values, despite the RBA holding at their July meeting. So nationally, home values were up 0.6%. It represents 6 consecutive months of growth. And more than that, we saw a very broad-based increase, rising across every capital city market, interestingly led by Darwin with a very strong 2.2% result over the month. But we also saw the mid-sized capitals, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, continue to dominate the market. Brisbane and Adelaide rising 0.7% and Perth rising 0.9%. On the other end of the spectrum was Hobart, with values inching just 0.1% higher over the month. But that still sees nice little turnaround in the Hobart market, which is up 1.6% over the year to date.
Yeah, so St Mary's at the moment is a booming suburb for Western Sydney, more just due to affordability. Most of the people buying in St Mary's are young families or young couples hoping to enter the market and buy the first property. Medium house prices in St Mary's are around $1 million. Units are around 450,000, but townhouses at the moment, which is the hot stock, around 800,000.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit further, because you were telling me off here there is an awful lot of these first home buyers gravitating to these townhouse stock in St Mary's. So tell us a little bit more about that phenomenon.
Most brand new townhouses are now ranging anywhere from 800 to 850,000, which a lot more young families want something brand new with less maintenance. So a lot of buyers are snatching onto that, which is the first entry, like I was telling you earlier. They'll probably live there for around 5 years, use all that growth, and then eventually upsize into a house. So they are getting either 3 or 4 bedroom townhouses. On average, they're around 180 square meters, ranging anywhere from, let's say, brand new to even 10 years old.
Ready to take your real estate knowledge to the next level? So are we.
We have now reached a point where having $4 in your pocket is only halfway to a price of coffee in some joints around Australia. Yeah, I mean, I got charged the other day exactly that, $8 for a large coffee. Is that crazy? I mean, I'm a reasonable person, but forget paying $8 for a coffee. $8 towards eggs and bacon, yeah, I can do that. But the cost of living, it's a thing. There's no running away from it. And what if you say in the office today or the work site, hey, my shout for a round of coffees? I mean, forget that. It ain't happening, is it? And if you have a coffee story that you'd like to leave a voice message, do it. Send us a voice message today and we'll share your message tomorrow. Well, it's a Wednesday morning. It is August the 20th, and we're going to catch up with Roger Wilkins from the University of Melbourne. And good morning to you, Roger. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. How much do you pay for your coffee, by the way?
I do all mine at home or at work. So I'm fortunate that we have a coffee machine here at work. So yeah, I'm pretty staggered to hear that it's $8 for a coffee. That's getting ridiculous.
You know, it used to be a thing when people were saying, well, saving up for a house deposit, you've got to say goodbye to your coffees, you know, your smashed avocado. But that's kind of taking it to a whole new level. I'm not sure how many people can afford to actually pay that day in, day out. You know, some people have 2 coffees, 3 coffees. They're paying that. Gee, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, it's becoming more and more true, that statement. I guess we used to think it was a bit ridiculous to say you could get a house deposit together by avoiding coffee, but it's not sounding so ridiculous if it's $8 a coffee.
Australia's tax system gives owner-occupiers a rare privilege, and this is living in their homes rent-free while avoiding taxation on that benefit. And economists are arguing that this untaxed income from imputed rent creates inequality as renters and landlords face far stricter tax obligations. Now, I want you to tell us a little bit about this study that you have done, this report out. Maybe first off, just explain to people what imputed rent is exactly.
Yes, imputed rent is a rather abstract concept because there's no actual flow of money. But what it refers to is if you own your own home, you get housing services from that. You know, your house accommodates you. And what imputed rent is it's the value of those services. It's like if I was to rent that house instead of own it, how much would I have to pay in rent for that?
Yeah, and I can see how people might get a little bit confused with this because it is an abstract concept that you are talking about, because imputed is estimated, but it is a real benefit that people receive. And that is the premise of buying a home in the first place, is to get, as you say, those housing services that you're talking about if you live in it. And of course, as well as that, the investment from buying it in the first place.
But as I said, it is very real. So it's in our national accounts. So, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, when it produces the quarterly GDP figures and so forth, imputed rent is in there as part of our incomes. So it certainly has legitimacy. It's not something that me and my co-author Peter Szyminski have just sort of made up. It's a very, real phenomenon. And it is actually taxed in some other countries. I think Denmark's one. And in fact, in 1915 and 1916, for a little while there, even in Australia, we taxed it for a little while. Hard to believe they could do it over 100 years ago, but there you go, they did it. We were sort of saying, well, we weren't so much coming from a position of, we need to go after homeowners. It was more just, well, we know that there's, the home's an important source of economic well-being. So what if we looked at the income that people effectively get from their home?
So if they're dealing directly with the bank, then they're just going to get the answers that particular bank and their policies will give them. Whereas if they're dealing with a broker, particularly one who is willing to advise and take the time to explain things and likes working with first home buyers, because they don't all like working with first home buyers. But if they're working with one of those types of brokers who takes that time, then the broker will be able to advise them on, well, which bank is going to look at their new situation more favourably, because they all have different policies, but also potentially what first home buyer incentives might be available to them that might assist, so that there's a lot of other, questions or avenues that they could be looking at to get information. From listening to your rendition there, it did sound like they're just dealing directly with the bank. And if that's the case, I'd recommend they talk to a broker.
So I want to get on to talking about post-rate cut vibe in the market. It happened last week. How much of a difference has that made in your corner?
Well, my buyer's agency business is Sydney, but of course we do vendor advisory and help first home buyers across the whole country. So it is interesting talking to people in different areas and getting a bit of a gauge in terms of the responses. Sydney's been a very flat, stable market, say, for the last 18 months or so. So there is that sort of sense that, look, at some point prices are going to take off again. Melbourne has been in decline and then it's sort of stabilised in recent times. And there's been some growth in that market, some early shoots. In those sort of two markets, you get this sort of sense that, look, the market's about to take off and interest rates as they fall will only fuel that, So those markets have that buyers thinking of maybe I need to act now, and sellers thinking maybe I need to hold off and wait until prices rise. And then you've got other markets that have been hot in recent years, Perth and Adelaide and Brisbane, for example. They're just fearful that prices will never slow down, although I have to say the price growth has definitely slowed down, certainly in Perth and Adelaide. I guess it depends where you are and whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller as to what you think might happen and what you might do as a result of that.
Yeah, yesterday we were having a look back with Margaret Lomas over 30, 40 years with mortgages, etc. Something we didn't get on to talking about was the median house price back in 1995. I'm going to test your knowledge here because I reckon you'd probably do quite well with this, because it's probably going back 1995. Maybe that was around when you first bought your property. Maybe it was later. But Sydney in 1995, house price, what do you reckon the median was in Sydney in 1995?
I'm totally taking a stab because this was before I got into real estate as a career, but I had bought my first property, I think, in 1995. So it just shows my age there. I'm going to take a stab. I'm going to think it's in the 200s somewhere.
Yeah, I knew that you were going to get very close to that. 197 grand. 1995, that was the median house price. Melbourne, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, I know it's going to be less than Sydney, so I'm going to guess in the 160s.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. 85 grand for a house.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, 85 grand.
Oh, wow.
Brisbane was 127,000. Take a stab at Adelaide.
Hey, so hang on. You're telling me Brisbane in 1995 was about 50% higher than Melbourne?
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah.
I have not actually gone back that far in time. That really does surprise me. Are we talking houses or dwellings?
Houses. These are houses. Yeah.
I find that hard to believe, but, you know, hey, I haven't seen it. I haven't gone that far back and split capital cities. But look, Adelaide, I would have to think was less than Melbourne. So maybe that's in the 60s.
81,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with Melbourne's. I don't think Melbourne's is right. It feels wrong to me. I mean, it could be right, but it just feels wrong.
Yep, so it's all about doing that due diligence. Now, sourcing the correct real estate data when doing your research, you know, people are still lacking the right way to go about this and placing too much trust in one person to do it for them. You know, people do more due diligence, Veronica, on buying a smart television these days. You know, what is the black ratio of the television? What smart apps come with the television? Is it 8K compatible? all of that stuff, rather than, you know, bring it over to all that due diligence for a property.
You know, we often joke that people spend more time choosing a toaster than they do a property. I think my feeling on this is that it's because really the amount of information that you do need to be able to absorb and process and interpret, analyse to buy a property and make good decisions is quite overwhelming. You know, it's much easier to look at something that has a finite amount of comparison points, for argument's sake, and it's much easier to make that decision by using data. But also property is about data and the art. So it's the art and the science. And the art is where a lot of people who place too much reliability on data, they don't understand the metrics they should be looking at. They don't understand how to interpret those metrics. And quite often you've got a lot of property marketers that are really using data to convince people they should be doing things, but that data is inaccurate in its application. And it's a dangerous pathway for people, I think, to place too much importance on data because they don't know what they're doing and they don't know how to interpret that data.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.